if you're still saying we live in the era of the dying dinosaurs, you don't need these huge buildings where the dinosaurs were living in. We don't need their holes any longer. And maybe there's already some places where you see this building where many smaller companies are sitting together. But it is a very static situation. And if you're living with the idea that if you have to go for other coalitions all the time, you're working for all kinds of different groups, maybe it's not so handy to have an office in a building in a certain city and just have your own place, like I do. You're in my house now, but it is my working place, because this is my basis. But it's also more or less my business card. It tells me more than my business card. It does not tell my function, it tells me who I am.
Now, one thing is really interesting is we still have this idea, and this was something that it's never proved, is that you can work at home, that you work for a firm, but you don't have to, The Death of Realists, The Death of Distance. There was a popular book with that title, that we called it hoteling, that you don't really need an office, that you could work at home, that it doesn't matter where you work. This turns out to be absolutely untrue. It does matter where you work. Your physical surroundings influence you quite a bit. The Chinese are right about that in feng shui. But also, you don't learn anything when you're at home. You could learn about your dog, and you could learn about what your wife's cooking or what you're cooking, but you don't really learn from your colleagues. And people think, well, yes, you can, because they send you memos. Anyone who thinks that has no idea what learning's about. So they're getting a reversal of that, the idea that you better come to the office now and then.
Sometimes it's very simplistic changes in the workplace. One of the things that seems to be working with doctors now is, a piece of tape in a hospital room that says, don't cross this boundary unless you just wash your hands. That's about as simple approach as you can get, but it's an approach that appears to be working. A checklist that a surgeon would use in a surgical operation seems very obvious, but most hospitals haven't used it, and the ones that do seem to perform much better. So I think we need to look very broadly, sometimes very simply, at what can we do to remind people how to do their work more effectively. We have done some work suggesting that knowledge workers who are better networked tend to perform better. So obviously workplaces can either facilitate network connections or they can hinder them, and so that's a factor as well. We know that knowledge workers who are engaged in their work and stimulated by their work tend to perform better. I think the workplace can add to that. We know that knowledge workers who have strong friendship relationships at work tend to perform better and stay longer at organizations, and the workplace can either hinder or facilitate that.
When I was with IBM, I mentioned that there wasn't one IBM executive, and there were 2,000 of them, I was one myself, who ever got that job and didn't have an office, wasn't in the office a lot. They just were home and they got promoted. No one gets promoted that way, and no one learns much that way. Or even people who seem to be exemplars of individual effort. Steve Jobs at Apple, Thomas Edison. It's not true. Einstein, my father used to tell me, he was all by himself in Switzerland in 1905 and he wrote these equations. Einstein knew all the other physicists who were working on these issues. They were always writing letters to one another and meeting at conferences. There's a great deal written now about wikis and blogs and Web 2.0 and all these social computing tools, which are ubiquitous and universal. I just think it's a lot of noise, sound and fury indicating nothing, as Shakespeare said.
There's an incredible energy around these technologies for people who get it, for people who understand that this is a way for you to maintain a network of connections to people that you know and that you want to continue to know over time. They understand the value of this, and so they're willing to put in the time, perhaps during work, for sure after work, into things that enhance their ability to perform at work. That ability to rapidly pull together colleagues, tap them for their expertise, perhaps involve them in small amounts of collaboration on an as-needed basis. They see that as the basis for their success in the future, and that's very different from the resources the company hands you or tells you you're allowed to use. And so each new wave of technology creates this new functionality, and then people and managers have to figure out how they will appropriate that, what the impacts will be, and in what ways it can change how they compete.
unless you change the processes, unless you change the authority patterns, unless you change the incentives of how people are rewarded, that stuff is just a lot of noise. It's fun, it's interesting, I use them, you use them, but it doesn't change anything in a substantial way. It doesn't change the way knowledge flows. It may change who speaks to whom, but in terms of the real structures of the organization, it doesn't change them. And if it doesn't change that, it's just a lot of stuff without great impact. No one in the history of the world ever gives up power voluntarily. I'm sorry, you'd have to really show me examples of that before you got me to believe that.
So we worked with a large financial services firm, and this mid-level manager had decided to cobble together from public sources, from open source software, some Web 2.0 applications, so a wiki system, a blogging platform, a Facebook-like internal application, and all tied together. And he wanted to let this out as a proof of concept. So just before Christmas this past year, he sent links to 10 people that he knew. And when he came back to look at it in early January, there were 2,000 people using it. And they had self-organized to a little help discussion forum to answer questions that other people had. They were spontaneously trying to combine different wikis that some people had started that were similar into one kind of central spot. They were self-organizing.
Basic philosophy that more collaboration is better is killing us in organizations and as a society. It's implicit in every technology that's out there today. You know, if we just make people more accessible, you know, they'll solve problems and everybody will succeed. It's implicit in all the transitions to matrix structures or things like that. And I think it's going to be a real downfall to organizational productivity. I'm in so many organizations right now where 50% of what we're doing is finding ways to pare back all those unproductive collaborations because people don't know who they have to consult on what decision. So I think that's something that's richly got to be addressed.
I think you're going to see a major breakthrough coming about to tame the Web 2.0 information glut and to also give you a form of project management that maintaining control and managing the project goes along with that emergent behavior of how the humans to humans interact.
So I think this ability to collaborate internally is really important. That companies that succeed at collaborating internally will also win the battle that is the strategic battle for the future, which is how to run organizations and profit from resources that are not owned by the organization. And I think that's one of the key strategic challenges in the future, where you have to ask yourself, are there more smart people outside your organization or inside your organization?
You know, I just constantly go back to the ancient Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times, and we certainly do.